They kicked me out of my own room. Big mistake. Pack your things. Daniel and Ava need your room. That was how my mother said it. No discussion, no apology, no "would you mind?" Just a decision that had already been made, delivered like I was a guest overstaying my welcome instead of the person who had kept that house standing for the last 5 years. I remember staring at her, still holding the grocery bags I had just brought in, one cutting into my fingers because I'd frozen in place. "My room?" I asked. She sighed like I was being difficult. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder. That word almost made me laugh, because for years I had been the one making everything easier. When my dad got hurt and couldn't work overtime anymore, I covered the electric bill. When the water heater burst 2 winters ago, I paid for the replacement. When the roof started leaking over the back bedroom, I was the one on a ladder with a tarp in the rain because my brother Daniel was too busy, and my parents were too stressed. I was always too useful to appreciate and too dependable to respect. Daniel, meanwhile, was the golden child. Always had been. He was charming when he wanted something, careless when he got it, and forgiven before he even apologized. He drifted in and out of jobs, disappeared for weeks, and still somehow got introduced to people as our son who's figuring things out. I worked full-time, paid bills, fixed things, and apparently ranked somewhere below figuring things out. So when he showed up one Sunday afternoon with his brand new wife Ava and 2 suitcases, I already knew how the story would go before anyone said a word. Ava came from money. Not absurd private jet money, but the kind that made people speak softer around her. The kind that made my parents suddenly care about appearances. She had polished nails, expensive shoes she somehow wore indoors without seeming rude, and a smile so thin it looked drawn on. She hugged my mother, kissed my father on the cheek, glanced at me, and then looked away like I was part of the furniture. By dinner, it was official. "We'll stay here for a few months," my father announced, cutting into his chicken like this was generous news. "Just until they save up." I looked at Daniel. "You told me last month you got a signing bonus." He didn't even blink. "Most of that went to wedding expenses." Ava touched his arm. "And the market is terrible right now. We don't want to settle." Of course not. Settling, apparently, was for people like me. I asked the obvious question. "So where exactly are they staying?" Nobody answered immediately. Then my mother folded her napkin, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Your room." I actually laughed then because it sounded too ridiculous to be real. "You're joking." "We're not," my father said. "There's a guest room," I said. "It's too small," Ava replied. "For 2 adults?" I asked. She gave me a pitying smile. "Daniel has a lot of clothes." I turned to him. "Then maybe Daniel should rent an apartment." His expression hardened. "Why are you acting like this is some personal attack?" I looked around the table, waiting for someone to say it was insane, that of course they weren't throwing me out of my own room to make space for the favored son and his new wife. Instead, my mother said, "You can move downstairs." The basement. Unfinished. Concrete floor. One tiny window near the ceiling. Smelled permanently like damp cardboard and old paint. I set my fork down very carefully. "No." The whole table went silent, not because they were shocked I was upset, because I almost never said no. My father leaned back in his chair. "Excuse me?" I said no, that's my room. My mother's face changed first. Hurt, then outrage, then that familiar expression she used whenever she wanted to frame my resistance as cruelty. "After everything we've done for you." That line. Every controlling parent keeps one loaded and ready. I could have listed what I'd done for them. I could have reminded them whose money had gone into this house every month for years. But something told me not to waste the breath. Daniel stepped in with that fake, calm older brothers use when they're about to be condescending. "Just be reasonable, Mia. It's temporary." "That's funny," I said. "So was me moving back in after my breakup." 5 years later, I'm still paying half your parents' expenses." Ava's eyes flicked to my parents. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You didn't have to say that." "No, I didn't. I also didn't have to replace the furnace, cover the taxes last year, or pay for the plumbing repair in March. But here we are." My mother stood up so abruptly her chair scraped the tile. "We are not doing this in front of Ava." I looked at her. "No, you're doing it in front of Ava. You're throwing me out of my room in front of Ava." Ava finally spoke, and her tone was syrup over ice. "I don't want to cause tension." That almost sent me over the edge. "You are the tension." Daniel stood. "Don't talk to my wife like that. And don't move her into my room." What followed was exactly what always happened when the family story got challenged. Everybody talked louder, and somehow I became the problem. I was selfish, ungrateful, jealous, petty. My father told me I was embarrassing myself. My mother cried. Daniel accused me of ruining his first week of marriage. At no point did anyone deny the central fact. They wanted me out because Daniel wanted comfort, Ava wanted space, and I was the easiest person to displace. That night, while I was still at work, they moved my things. I came home to find half my closet in garbage bags lined up in the hallway, and my mattress dragged halfway down the basement stairs. For a second, I just stood there, keys still in my hand, looking at the bags like they belonged to somebody else. Then I heard laughter upstairs. Daniel and Ava were in my room. My room. I walked up the stairs so calmly it scared even me. Daniel was adjusting a lamp on my nightstand. Ava was standing by my dresser, opening drawers. "What are you doing?" I asked. Daniel turned like he owned the place. "Setting up?" "Get out." Ava let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Excuse me?" I looked straight at her. That dresser was bought with my money. That bed frame was assembled by me. Those curtains were sewn by me. So yes, get out. My mother appeared in the doorway behind me like she had been waiting for the explosion. "Stop this right now." "No," I said. "You stop." My father came up next. "You don't speak to your mother that way." "Then she shouldn't move my life in trash bags." The room was tight with rage now, all of us standing too close, years of resentment finally getting air. And then Daniel made his mistake. He smirked. Actually smirked. "You're acting real possessive for someone who doesn't even own this house." The second he said it, something clicked into place. Because he was right. I didn't own the house. But I did own something else. Every receipt, every transfer, every invoice, every text where my mother asked if I could just cover it this once. Every email from contractors thanking me for payment. Every bank record tied to the renovation loan I had taken out in my name because my father's credit was too damaged to qualify. For years, I had kept everything, mostly because I'm the kind of person who files manuals for appliances and labels cords in a drawer. My family called it obsessive. That night, it became useful. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I just looked at Daniel and said, "You're right. I don't own this house." Then I turned and went downstairs. They probably thought they'd won. That was their second mistake. I spent most of that night at the little folding table in the basement, surrounded by folders and my laptop. At 1:14 a.m., I found the copy of the private agreement my father had signed with me 3 years earlier. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't formal ownership, but it was better than I remembered. At the time, my parents were behind on property taxes and about to lose the house. I had used my savings and a personal loan to catch them up, pay for emergency repairs, and consolidate a few debts tied to the property. My father had signed a notarized repayment agreement acknowledging that the money was a secured loan against the home, payable upon sale, transfer, or refinancing. He had insisted it was just to make me feel better. He probably assumed I'd never use it. But there it was, signed, dated, notarized. And because the amount, with repairs and documented payments since then, now totaled far more than anyone in that house could repay quickly, I suddenly had leverage. Real leverage. The next morning, I called in sick to work and booked a consultation with an attorney. A real estate attorney, very calm, very sharp, who read everything in silence and then looked up at me with the first validating expression I'd seen in 24 hours. They forced you out of your room after years of financial reliance on your contributions? Yes. And they're under the impression none of this matters? Yes. She nodded once. That was unwise. By the time I got home, I had a formal demand letter in my email. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just devastatingly clear. It outlined the secured debt owed to me, the documentation supporting it, and my intent to seek immediate legal remedies if the family attempted to refinance, transfer, or sell the property without satisfying the debt. It also recommended, very politely, that any further mistreatment or disposal of my belongings cease immediately. I printed 3 copies. Dinner that night was quiet until I sat down at the table and placed the envelope in the center. "What's this?" my father asked. "Something you should read." He opened it carelessly. By the second paragraph, his face changed. By the third, my mother was asking, "What is it?" Daniel reached for the paper, and my father snapped, "Wait." I sat there and took a sip of water while the room slowly filled with panic. "This is ridiculous," my mother said finally, though her voice shook. "Is it?" I asked. My father looked up at me. "You got a lawyer?" "Yes." Daniel gave a dismissive laugh that sounded forced. "You're really doing this over a bedroom?" I looked at him. "No. I'm doing this because all of you decided I was disposable." Ava reached for the letter and read faster than the others. Her polished calm cracked first. "This says the house secures a debt to her?" "It does," I said. My father slammed the paper on the table. "That agreement was never meant to be used?" I finished. "Maybe. But it was meant to protect me. Those were your words, remember?" My mother started crying. Not soft, sad crying. Angry crying. The kind meant to pull attention back to her. "We are family, Mia." I almost laughed. "No. Family doesn't drag your mattress to a basement while you're at work." Daniel pushed his chair back. "So what? You're going to take the house?" "No," I said. "I'm going to collect what I'm owed. And if you can't pay it, then yes, I'll pursue every legal option available." Ava turned slowly toward Daniel. "You told me they helped you with the house," she said. He went pale. "They did." I leaned back. "No, I did." That part landed exactly the way I wanted it to. Because Ava didn't care that they'd mistreated me, but she absolutely cared that Daniel had lied about the financial reality she had married into. The next week was chaos. Whispered arguments behind closed doors, calls to relatives. My aunt texting me that I was breaking your mother's heart. My cousin asking if it was true I was suing the family. I answered almost nobody. Meanwhile, Ava's parents got involved. That was the part Daniel never saw coming. Apparently, when wealthy people hear the phrase secured debt against the house, they don't shrug it off. They ask questions, detailed ones. And once Ava's father started asking, the whole flimsy little fantasy my brother had built collapsed fast. No, Daniel and Ava were not just temporarily staying with family while saving. No, my parents were not comfortably stable homeowners. No, the house was not a peaceful family property with plenty of room. It was a financially strained home with a large private obligation attached to it, and the daughter they had just pushed into the basement was the person who had been propping the whole thing up. Within 10 days, Ava moved out. Not permanently at first, supposedly. She went to get some space. Daniel followed 2 days later after what sounded like the loudest fight in recorded history. Suddenly, my room was empty again. No one asked me to move back in. My parents barely spoke to me. Then, 3 weeks later, my father asked if we could sit down and discuss a resolution. Funny how respectful people get when paperwork enters the chat. We sat in the kitchen. Same table, different power. He looked older than I remembered. "We can't repay everything at once," he said. "I know." My mother kept dabbing at her eyes, but this time I didn't let it move me. He slid a proposal across the table. Their plan was to refinance, formally account for the debt, and repay me over time. They would also convert the guest room into a proper suite for themselves and sell the house within the year if needed. "And my room?" I asked. My mother flinched. My father cleared his throat. "It's yours." I held his gaze. It always was. In the end, I agreed to the structured repayment because I wanted out more than revenge. I wanted freedom, not a war story. 6 months later, I used the first large payment to put a down payment on a small townhouse across town. It wasn't huge, but it was quiet, clean, mine. The day I moved in, I carried every box into the bedroom myself and set them down right in the middle of the floor, just because I could. No one would ever tell me to leave my own room again. Daniel and Ava split before their first anniversary. Last I heard, he still tells people the marriage failed because of family stress, which is a nice way of saying lies have expiration dates. My parents and I speak now, carefully, like people walking over ice that already cracked once. Better than before in some ways, because at least now everything is honest. Or honest enough. But if there's one thing that whole mess taught me, it's this. The people who benefit most from your silence will always call you cruel the moment you stop cooperating. They will say you changed. They will say you overreacted. They will say it was only a room. But it was never only a room. It was the assumption underneath it. That I would shrink to make other people comfortable. That I would finance the life that erased me. That I would keep proving my love by accepting disrespect. They kicked me out of my own room. Big mistake. Because that was the moment I stopped trying to earn a place in other people's house rules. This is the end.